Hi, you're listening to the Big Sound Small Town podcast, where you will hear all the big sounds from a small town perspective. I am your host, Sandy Carlton, and this podcast is brought to you from our friends at Defiant Whisky, distilled in beautiful Golden Valley, North Carolina.
Got it. My name's Chris Simovich from Blue Ridge Distilling Defiant Whisky, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about whiskey and what we're producing in North Carolina and Bostic.
That's kind of exciting to have a North Carolina-based whiskey.
Absolutely. That's one of the things. We were one of the first distilleries actually to produce whiskey in North Carolina, as far as being a micro distillery.
Right.
And so we've been doing it since 2010, and we are where we are because we're built on an aquifer, which is about 300 feet below the distillery. We built that right on top. So right underneath us, 300 feet down, are limestone caves that get filled with the water that washes our water with that limestone and gives us a perfect pH for the whiskey that we want.
That's great. Water is a big essential for whiskey, right?
Water is one of the most important things you can put into the whiskey.
Yeah. So what led you to do this?
So what led me to do this is I was sort of shanghaied into it by the owners of it. Most of them are from Appalachian State.
Yeah.
And they live up in Boone. And they are from the area, they're locals from the area, and they really wanted to have a distillery, and I had worked for them for many years, and they kept on having me go back to the distillery to check on certain aspects of it to see if it was a viable operation. And then after about the fifth time, I kind of realized something was going on, and I finally said, "Guys, what are you up to?" And they said, "Well, guess what? You're going to be running the company." So that's how they got me.
So then I guess you just took it and run with it from there.
Absolutely, yeah. So when we first started out, it was already a great operation. We had two SKUs, as we call them. So we had our American single malt, 100% malted barley, and we had our 100% malted rye. But I kind of figured that there's something more we should add to the mix.
Right.
So we started adding brands along the way and actually making a lot of small course brands. So only a couple hundred bottles.
Right.
Limited series. We just put out what's called our Devil's Cut. Which was, of course, as most of the things we do, by accident.
Right.
We use spirals in our production, much like the wine industry does.
Right.
And so by doing that, we have empty spirals afterward, which contain a lot of the whiskey in them. We normally sell those to cideries and also to barbecue joints.
Sure.
And so they use those in their recipes.
Oh, yeah.
And get both the whiskey and the wood out of it. But in this case, we had them in milk cans out in the sun, and they leached back out the whiskey that was in them. As you know, the Devil's Cut is what soaks into the wood. So once we ended up taking that out, cutting it down a little bit because it was just way too strong, we came up with our Devil's Cut whiskey. And so we'll be coming out with that as the wood releases what it releases every once in a while.
So that is a brand that is it has its life of its own. It dictates to you when it's available.
It tells us when it's ready, it tells us when it's not, and it changes every single time because we're going to have in it, it's going to have our rye, it's going to have our barley-based American single malt, and it's going to have what we've started producing, bourbon. Okay. So it's going to have a little bit of bourbon in it. So the flavor profile will be different every time, but it's always going to have a lot of the same flavors and tastes from vanilla and caramels, and obviously a heavy oak profile.
Right. I mean, that's great. Was that just an accident?
It was a complete accident. We never intended to do it. And like I said, we just needed space, so we put those milk cans filled with those spirals out in front of the distillery where the sun hits, and it leached out, and we always try to get as much of our whiskey from wherever we can. Right. And when we tasted it, it was obviously at a much higher strength.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it was.
So it was at about 125 proof. Yeah. And we proofed that down anywhere between 101 and 110. Our first batch was 110.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, it's super smooth. And those that like oaky whiskey love the Devil's Cut. It lasted, by the way, we put it out, I think it was on Wednesday, and we sold our last bottle of it yesterday. Okay, so for right now, it's out.
Your guys are in not a real high commercial area, so how do you get your message out to people that you do have your whiskey?
Well, it's funny. So we've been there for 10 years.
Right.
We've started in 2010, and we really started by word of mouth. So we have sales in Florida, we have sales in New York, and we have our whiskey in about 20 different states.
That's great.
But until the last 3 years, we didn't really have locals coming to us, and we really wanted to have locals coming to us. And the distillery itself wasn't so much a destination, if you will.
Right.
So there wasn't really a bar set up in there. There wasn't a tasting area set up in there. So we changed that. When we came on board, we changed that, and we started using social media quite a bit to our advantage. So Instagram, Facebook.
Right.
We're coming out with a TikTok program where we're actually going to be doing recipes and filming recipes on how to make some of the different whiskeys and how to sort of go from simple ones to sort of the fancy extreme ones where you have to get an egg from South America and all that nutty stuff.
Yeah.
But we're also just going to do some simple recipes, cocktails that everybody can do, and we're going to do them seasonally. So we'll turn them out seasonally.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you are on top of it. Sounds like you've surrounded yourself with good, knowing people, and
Well, there's no such thing as being able to do any type of production in whiskey by yourself. There's no one person, there's no distiller that's the linchpin. There's no salesperson that's the linchpin. It is really a team-based event. And so it takes everybody to do what we do, and we have got a phenomenal team at Blue Ridge Distilling.
Well, the team is the important thing.
It really is.
With anything. I mean, my podcast, I have a team that is responsible for my success at it, is good people working for you, you're dependent on it, really. And it looks like you've done a really good job. Now, okay, let's go cost-wise. With the prices being like they are, do you have a supply chain management problem at all, or do you?
So we did, during COVID, I think everybody and every distillery around the country, if not around the world, had a supply chain distribution issue. So one of the weirdest ones that we had that you wouldn't think were bottles. So our bottles became the largest issue. We didn't have any bottles. We couldn't get any bottles.
Right.
And that was unheard of. Now the prices obviously also went up for the bottles.
Of course they did.
Shipping prices went out of the, went over the top and over the roof. But the one thing we saw as far as grains, we've had a great supply with grains. We've had our same grain supplier since our inception. We're not changing that.
That's great.
And the one thing you see, there was large price hikes with both barley and rye. Rye tends to be, it's more expensive on the shelf because it's about 2 to 3 times more expensive than barley. Right. During the pandemic, those prices shot out off the top. Yeah. But at the same time, we've been able to keep supplies. One of the things I was like, I never want this to happen again. So I got enough corks to last us through a next pandemic. I got enough bottles to last us through. And it used to be the concept would be, if you're using what's called a Kaizen concept, where you get just enough bottles to last until you run out and order the next. Well, I think a lot of places have changed, whereas if you have the financial capability to do so, you're going to get more than that now, so that you're going to get, when you have a supply chain issue, you're not going to be affected by it. And that's where we are right now. That's
we're really, really good.
It's a lucky place to be, and not everybody can do it.
And that is, I guess that comes with being diligent and understanding the market, and realizing the possibility of that happening again. I mean, and having the financial forthwith to be able to afford to do that.
And we've got great owners that are they back us all the way with all the different plays that we have. They don't often say no, but everybody has to work within those confines. Sure. But they also understand, and as we understood, that you need to have a cork and you need to have a bottle. You can have all the whiskey in the world, but it doesn't do us any good sitting in a cask or on a shelf. Sure. So that's one of the things we did.
All right, let's talk about it. How did you learn the alcohol trade?
So I think most people would say I learned it from a bar. Actually, on the other side of it, drinking it, but the truth,
you don't learn to taste that way. That's for sure.
That's true. So I've got many years' experience of doing that.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I have very few years' experience on the distilling side. However, what I told our master distiller, and I tell our head distiller now, I might not know what you guys know. When I first started, I said I might not know what you guys know now, but look at me in 2 or 3 years.
I will know.
And I will know. And so what's great about the distilling industry, if you're willing to do it, you need to study all the time, and you need to study every day. And I love reading, I love learning, and I love finding out new things about whiskey every day. And anybody who says, oh, I know everything there is to know about whiskey, that's not the person I want to be with.
Sure.
So because you're never going to know everything about whiskey. It changes all the time, and you'll find also not only does it change all the time, but you're going to go back through history and find things that were being done that got lost. And that's some of the things that are really awesome. One of the most interesting things that we're going to be working with, and if I'm going too far afield, you let me know, but
no, we're good.
There was a Japanese gentleman that came to the United States back in the late 1800s, and he brought what's called Japanese koji, rice, to fermentation, and he made whiskey out of rice. And they're doing that now in Japan, but his methodology, basically, it was so good it got bought out. He was in the Midwest, yeah. So we're trying to work with koji spores to do our yeast production and to do our floats.
It will not be sake.
No, it's whiskey.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you've never had it, and hopefully I'll be able to get you a taste. Yeah. So when you taste it, you're saying this cannot be made out of rice, but it's made out of rice, and it is whiskey. It won't fall under the guidelines of American whiskey, but when anybody would pick up a glass of it, it's really phenomenal stuff.
And that is too part of rendering a novel idea into the whiskey industry is part of the mission too, right?
Absolutely. And we're able to do that a lot easier with, our mash bills are pretty straightforward. And one of the unusual things that we do, like I said, we have like some things that we just hold on to tradition as far as the water. We don't mess with it. We don't do osmosis on our water because we'll take all the good stuff that's in it.
I got you.
A result of that is, and you're going to find a lot of places that don't do cold filtration, which we do not.
Right.
You're going to get flocculation and you're going to get ghosts. So you'll see in a bottle sometimes it looks like little snow or whatnot. That's not a bad thing if you've seen the movie Bottle Shock when it turns a funky color.
Right.
When you get that flocculation, that's a good thing. That means the distiller was doing what they were supposed to.
Right.
It's akin to when you cut open a Parmesan cheese or a country ham and you see those crystals in there.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So you're going to get that, and the only reason that comes out, it's we put them through a 0.2 micron filter. That's as far as we go as filtration of our water, but it actually comes out of molecular stasis once it goes up. Like if you keep your whiskeys at 56 degrees is where your whiskey wants to be kept, by the way. But if you're keeping it way too cold, the calcium will come out of stasis, and if it's way too hot, North Carolina, we get hot all the time. You got your, bottle of whiskey in the back of the truck, then eventually it'll get flocculation in it. But there's no harm to it. It's actually just adds to the flavor of the taste, and you just got to know that that's what it is. But we purposely know that that's going to happen, and we don't change it. Right. So the other thing is wood, and that's one of the things we do play with for flavor. So we do our wood bills. Our mash bills stay pretty much the same. Our wood bills change. Nowadays you've got cherry oak, you've got Mizunura, Japanese wood oak, which brings completely different flavors. I'm going to mess up the pronunciation of it, but Arabuna, Brazilian woods, and they all bring a really unusual flavor to it. Some people love them, some people hate them.
Sure.
But you just got to experiment a little bit and see what works.
Do you have a hard time getting wood?
Oddly enough, the Mizunara and the Abunara, no. The cherry wood is really tough to get.
I can see where that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, woods, American woods they're probably a lot of demand for American woods, where there's probably less for the say Brazilian or Japanese.
There is, and the one good thing that we're doing though is because depending upon what your viewpoints are, we're not required to use new white oak barrels, American white oak barrels, except when we're making bourbon.
You're right.
So with our other barrel, we can use a used barrel.
Right.
We can use a whiskey barrel, we can use a wine barrel, we can use a sherry barrel, and all those bring a finishing flavor to your whiskey.
I'm sure it does.
Where a lot of people are just using that white oak. Now, the Europeans think we're crazy, the Scots in particular, the Irish, they buy all of our used barrels for bourbon, and they get that flavor profile into theirs, and they think we're nuts not to reuse our barrels over and over again. But we do have in America a great conservation concept where when you're cutting down those white oak trees, they're also replacing them at a double rate, so that we're going to have years from now, we're going to have those white oak barrels available to us as for generations to come.
Weird side note: I used to grow shiitake mushrooms. White oak is the best wood for that.
Yeah.
They grew great. Is preferred wood. I had a shiitake grant grew them for a number of years. White oak is a great wood.
It is. It's a phenomenal wood.
And fairly abundant. Like you say, they are replenishing the stock. So
They are. And you know what? And that's been in the last 10 years that they've really come up with a great conservation concept. So there will be, they think there's going to be a lag in about 50 years where we'll have a little bit of scarcity, but then it's going to bump back up again because of what we're doing now. And you got to start somewhere, so you got to start making the efforts now.
Yeah, you have to now. For also, we'll probably in 50 years, it'll be someone else's worries.
That's true, but we also, I want to make sure we're keeping that in mind so that they have to worry about something too. They're there to worry about something.
I agree, yeah. I mean, it's the conservation part of it is just a beautiful part to go along with. It says the industry is doing right. I mean, they're looking after their needs, but also the needs of the world, or the United States anyway. So.
And since you brought that up, if you don't mind, because one of the things I am proud of, we're really big into closed loop production. So what we try to do is, we're grain to glass.
Right.
So we go from grain, we crack our own grain, we do everything ourselves. All of our whiskey is in-house. We don't use any MGP or anything from anybody else. We do everything in-house. But on top of that, what we try to do is work with the local farmers, and either we're taking our chub, the used grains,
right,
and we're giving them out to the pig farmers that are local. We're also giving them out to the cattle farmers that are local, and to the regular farmers, because you can use that for composting.
Right.
A really cool thing is we just were approached by somebody that wants to use it for worm castings, to throw worms in there to make an even more efficient fertilizer.
Yeah.
So we love that type of concept so that nothing gets wasted.
Right. It's also giving back to community,
right,
as well as using the community to help grow your whole
absolutely
goodwill, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's not. Yeah, and we even we buy some of the cattle. We buy a couple of head of cattle, and we buy some of the hogs that come out of that.
Yeah.
And it's phanomenal. And actually, it does make a difference. Our feed makes a difference to the way they taste. It's wonderful.
That's a great. Yeah, I bet it does. I think it gives it the flavor already.
We do. We call them whiskey. We call them whiskey pigs.
Yeah. I mean, you have the built-in flavor.
Absolutely.
So. It's a great mission. Beside, I think people miss a lot of times just all the good stuff about whiskey. It just gets a bad rap in a lot of ways.
It does, and it is a shame. I mean, it used to be used medicinally, as you know, and I think if you keep your whiskey consumption in moderation. My concept of moderation might be different than others.
Sure.
And working in a distillery, that's just part of it. We taste off the still all day long. And that's the way our distillers do it. But I think if you're not going over the top and you're having a tipple now and then, there's nothing wrong with having
moderation is key to everything. So
including moderation.
Yeah, including moderation. I agree. Well. Is there anything else we need to know?
The only other thing I'd like to talk about, if you got the time for it, is our Patriot whiskey.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about that a little bit offline. Yeah. But so we produce a Patriot whiskey every year. The recipe changes every year, and it's always produced in November. Anywhere near, we put it out right around Veterans Day,
yeah.
And we always put a shindig on at the distillery for Veterans Day. The Marine Corps League is there. We have tons of veterans there, and we have barbecues and bluegrass music groups playing. But also, the real important thing about that, it's a limited edition, and 100% of the profits go to wounded veterans and those with severe PTSD.
That's just wonderful. That's just a great mission. You guys do good work besides just making good whiskey,
We try to, but we feel that's part of what, by being part of the community, we feel that that's part of what you should be doing.
It's an excellent mission. I think that one of the things we're walking away from here is that your mission is as good as your whiskey,
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
And that is a rarity in businesses these days. It's the mighty buck.
Yeah, well.
And that's it.
Yeah, but, I think, we have to make, we always say make a profit, but people are the most important thing.
Well, us sitting here talking, if I was not already a fan, it's pretty easy to be a fan because of the good work outside of the good whiskey.
Well, I appreciate that.
So I appreciate you coming by and doing this today.
Well, thank you very much. Anytime, and I hope you come by for the party on November 9th.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, sir.
Yes, sir.